Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our study of moral philosophy. Last time we took a look at the definition of ethics. Today we'll take a look at what are the branches of ethics and basically what is the nature of ethics. So, when we say someone is doing the right thing, how do we actually know what the right thing is? Do we follow rules? Do we think about consequences? Or do we just trust our conscience? Well, we see that we all may have different answers to these questions. Now, all these are in a way related to the different branches of ethics. Now, ethics is not just about saying what is right or wrong, it is about understanding how we know, why we believe, and how we apply those judgments in real life. So, once again, we see that ethics is about understanding how we know. It is also about why we believe, and it is how we apply those judgments in our real life. Now, therefore, philosophers have divided ethics into three main branches. So, we'll take a look at each of these branches. The first is the normative, or what we call as the practical ethics. So, the normative ethics is the core branch of ethics, and it deals with how people ought to act. In other words, it sets standards of right and wrong, and it also guides our moral behavior. So, what are the questions that are answered? So, it asks practical questions like what should I do? What is the right action? And what kind of a person I should be? And therefore, we see that these are questions that are part of our everyday life as well. Now, Aristotle focused on character, and therefore Aristotle would introduce something what we call as the virtue ethics. Now, this is an example of normative systems. Now, what does virtue ethics deal with? So, it will focus first and foremost on the character of the person rather than the action alone. So, in virtue ethics, the goal is to become a virtuous person, that is, someone who acts out of habit in a morally good way. And therefore, we'll see that virtues are habits like courage, honesty, temperance, and generosity. For example, a soldier who runs into danger to save others is courageous, not because he's doing it out of rule or because he will receive a reward, but we see that courage is part of his moral character. So, virtue ethics will basically ask the question, that is, what kind of person am I becoming through my actions? Next, we'll focus on deontological ethics. So, we will take this little bit more in detail later on, but just now, for our information, deontological ethics is something that is related to duty, and Kant is one of the proponents of this. So, deontological ethics will focus more on duty and moral law rather than the consequences. So, an action is right if it follows a moral rule that could be universalized. That means that moral rule should be right for everyone everywhere. Whether the person is in India or whether the person is in the UK or in the US, that rule should be applicable for everyone. It should be the same everywhere. Now, here the intention or the motive matters more than the outcome. For example, telling the truth is right even if it causes temporary trouble. Why? Because honesty is a moral duty. Similarly, a person who tells the truth out of respect for moral law acts ethically, even if it leads to loss or discomfort. So, for example, if you tell the truth, and if your friends may get angry with you for telling the truth and putting them in trouble, but an ethically right person would think it is my duty to tell the truth. Hence, whatever may be the situation, whether I may face trouble or people may hit me or I may lose my friends, still I must tell the truth. And therefore, deontological ethics will basically ask the main question: what is my duty? Next, we'll come to utilitarianism, that is taken up by John Stuart Mill. Again, as I said, these theories will take a look later on in more detail. But now we'll just kind of introduce ourselves to what are the branches of ethics. So utilitarianism will focus on the consequences of the action. So just the opposite of deontological. Now here the right action is the one that produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Hence, morality is measured by utility or the usefulness of the act in promoting happiness and reducing suffering. For example, a government imposing a lockdown during the pandemic may have caused inconvenience to many, but it also saved lives. So here we see that the consequence was saving life. And hence, according to utilitarianism, this lockdown was ethically justified because it was for the greatest overall good. So, therefore, utilitarianism will ask the question: what action will lead to the best outcome for everyone? Next, we'll take a look at meta ethics. What does it mean and what does it deal with? So, now meta ethics moves a step deeper. It does not ask about what is right or wrong, but it rather asks, what do we mean when we say something is right or wrong? Or can moral judgments be true or false? Or are our values in a way objective or relative? So it basically will study language, meaning, and the foundation of ethical concepts. So, for example, when we say that charity is good, meta ethics will ask the question: what do we mean by good? Okay, is good an emotion? Is it a command? Or is it just an universal fact? Or can good be measured? Or is it just a matter of opinion? Is there a meter to measure goodness? So, all these questions will be asked by meta ethics. Now, what are some of the meta ethical positions? So, first and foremost, we see is moral realism. That is, moral truths exist objectively. So, murder is wrong, and this is true everywhere, and it is always true. It is not that in the year 2050 murder will be right. No, murder is wrong, was wrong, and will always be wrong. Next important concept that we have to deal with is moral relativism. That is, moral truths also depend on the culture and situation. So, what is right in one culture may not be right in another culture. Okay, so because each of us know that different cultures have different traditions, different rituals, different rules. Hence, what may be right in one culture may be wrong in another. For example, in one culture, looking into the eyes of the other person and talking may be seen as a sign of honesty, and you may be encouraged to do it. Whereas in another culture, if you do the same thing, it could mean disrespect because that culture values or that culture requires you to kind of look down and then talk to an elderly person. So here we see what's right in one culture may not be right or appropriate in another culture. Now, we need to understand each of these things properly or each of these positions properly because they help us to judge moral actions. So, therefore, you cannot just look at a statement and say this is right or wrong. You have to look at all these situations. What is the culture? What is the situation? What is the position the person is in, etc. Next is emotivism. Now, moral statements express emotions rather than facts. Okay. So, for example, when you say stealing is wrong, okay, so this basically means that I dislike stealing. So, for example, when one person says euthanasia is wrong and another person says euthanasia is right, now, meta-ethics will study whether there is an objective truth behind these claims, or is it that both are just simply expressing their moral preferences. So, this is how, in a way, meta-ethics will try to deal with certain situations and scenarios. Next, we have to look at applied ethics. So, what is applied ethics? So, applied ethics takes the principles of normative ethics and it applies them to real world issues. So, basically, it is the practical application of the normative ethics. So, it asks how do we apply moral reasoning to modern social, technological, or even environmental challenges. Now, what are some of the examples of applied ethics? First, we see is you have medical ethics. Now, this will deal with debates on euthanasia, organ donation, abortion, then patient consent, etc. So, should doctors help terminally ill patient end their lives, or should it be that they should prolong their lives? Should a doctor assist in abortion or should he not? So, this is all the questions that come under the purview of medical ethics. Next is environmental ethics. So, this basically deals with our moral responsibility towards nature and non human life. So, this will basically ask the question, is deforestation morally wrong, even if it benefits the economy? For example, if you want to build a big industry, okay, but you have to cut around 200 trees, is it morally right? Okay, or is it morally wrong? So, these are the questions that environmental ethics will deal with. Next is business ethics. So it takes up issues like fair trade, corruption, worker rights, etc. So should a company prioritize profit over worker welfare, or should the company give more importance to the welfare of the workers rather than profits? So all this will come under the purview of business ethics. And finally, we have digital ethics that deals with privacy, AI, data security in the digital age. And we see that this is very much relevant and is one of the most kind of booming fields in today's world. Especially with the advent of AI, digital ethics has gained a lot of importance and it is something to, in a way, watch out for in the future. Now, in general, when we take a look at applied ethics, this makes philosophy in a way practical, and relevant. And in a way, applied ethics will in a way connect theory to the world situations. So it basically makes things practical for us, and it is connecting theory to the world that we live in. Now, another important aspect that we need to deal with is formal and material object of ethics. So, to put it in simple words, ethics can also be understood in terms of what it studies and how it studies it. So, for example, we see that we need to know what it studies and how it studies. So, the material object will basically deal with the what, that is the subject matter of ethics, whether it is human acts, behaviors, or conduct, like eating, speaking, helping, lying. So, for example, eating is a neutral human act. On the other hand, we see that eating selfishly while others starve will give it moral significance. So that becomes the formal object. So formal object is basically the how. It is the moral evaluation of those acts, whether it is good or whether it is bad. For example, eating greedily is immoral, whereas eating with gratitude is moral. Eating without sharing with others is bad, whereas eating and sharing the food with others is seen as good or right. So basically, the material object will deal with the what, that is the subject matter, basically the actions, the behaviors, whereas the formal object will deal with the how, that is how do we look at those acts, okay, or what makes those acts good or bad or right or wrong. Next is ethics versus morality. So, ethics, as we have seen already, is the theoretical reflection on moral life, whereas morality is the practical living out of those values. So, in terms of function, ethics will basically study, analyze, and question moral behavior, while morality will, in a way, practice, follow it, as well as apply it. By nature, ethics is a systematic philosophical discipline, while morality is everyday practice of right conduct. And we can compare ethics like grammar. It studies the rules of good speaking, while morality is like actual speaking, using those rules of grammar and speaking in real life. So, for example, in ethics, a student will discuss why cheating is wrong. So, ethics will explore the moral reasons why cheating in an exam is wrong. Morality is when that same student chooses not to cheat. That is, the student is living out the moral value. So, this is what we can say is one of the main difference between ethics and morality. So, ethics teaches us how to live well, whereas morality is living well. So, as we end this episode of branches and nature of ethics, maybe we can just reflect on these questions. So, can someone study ethics but still act immorally? Is it possible to be moral without knowing ethics? So even if I don't know ethics, or if there is some uneducated person who has not studied ethics, can he still be acting morally? Can he still be doing the right things? And which branch of ethics do you think is the most relevant to our times? Is it normative, is it meta, or is it applied? So do reflect on these questions and also feel free to comment. Till then, act ethically, and we shall meet for the next episode, that is on what are moral and non moral acts.